I'd like to show you what I love most about ExitTicket. Give you a tour of some of the features that convinced me as a classroom teacher to adopt this tool. I'm going to show you that moment that really convinced me of ExitTicket's usefulness. And then I'll show you a bit of the behind the scenes setup about how I got to that moment. I'll talk a little bit about my class routine and how I include ExitTicket into my typical agenda. And then I'd like to show you the big picture of my data and how I make decisions about what to teach and what I need to really focus on from the results of all of my little assessments. I was trying different assessment software, evaluating which one I really liked, and I was in the midst of giving ExitTicket a try when one of my students asked to speak with me after class. She was a high-performing student, but she was very shy. She took out her school-issued iPad, and she logged in with her ExitTicket account. She pulled up her scorebook. She looked down her standards, and as I would have assumed, I saw that her average was 80%, and most of her standards were scoring well. And then she found one that was red, and she explained that she had tried to look up what this meant and that she was struggling in order to figure out how she could best improve her score in this content area. And I was blown away by that. Here was a student that had self-diagnosed her learning needs, had tried to intervene and correct this lapse in her comprehension, and failing to do so, she made some time with her teacher to address this specific item in our standardized content. It was pretty cool that she had done this. So right then and there, I was convinced. Now let me show you how I got all of this information in the system. To get the mastery-based scorebook that I just showed you, you need to first make sure the Learning Targets app is activated in the App Center. So from my home screen, I'm going to click on the App Center, and I'm going to make sure that the Learning Targets app is currently active. Once that's active, what that will enable is, if I were to go to the course and term editor, there'll now be a Learning Targets button. Here's the information of my fictional school I've created. Edit these learning targets. This is the customizable list of curricular objectives I have throughout the year. I can make adjustments to this as the year goes on, but you may notice that I've just imported the 8th grade Common Core State Standards for ELA. Because I have the Learning Targets app active and I have Learning Targets added inside my course and term editor, when I make a new assessment and identify what class it belongs to, I can identify which concept or skill this assessment is measuring. So just to review, I first made sure that I had the Learning Targets app enabled in the App Center. Then I went to the course class editor and pressed the Learning Targets button to customize my list of learning targets. And then finally, when I was creating my assessments, I made sure to link either the entire assessment or each individual question to one of the standards or learning targets that I had authored. All of these elements come together to bring a mastery-based scorebook that my students were able to access to direct their learning. My typical class routine goes something like this. I shake my students' hands as they come in, find their seat, and begin their do now, which is typically a launch assessment from ExitTicket. We'll review that information, and I'll make sure that the previous content is still fresh in my students' minds. We'll review the day's learning target. Then I'll begin my direct instruction. I'll explain about the assignment today and what the students are expected to do. I'll model that behavior, and before we begin, I'll do a check for understanding, an ungraded practice assessment with ExitTicket. While it won't hit their grade books, I can use that information to make any interventions before I release the students for their individual or group assignments. After the bulk of the class, the assignment work is completed, we will review the content with an exit slip, or also known as an exit ticket, where we get our name. We can celebrate that we've achieved the day's learning target, or we can identify particular students that have grown from the previous week. Finally, we've come to the last part, where I'm going to review my cumulative data that I have collected from my students and use that information to inform my planning process. So what I'll do is I'll view my class. I can see the many assessments that I threw at my students today, but I'm more interested right now in going to the scorebook so I can see their grades. You'll notice that the scorebook is primarily empty because I'm just getting started with my unit. So this is the unit that I'm working on with my students. And you can see, if we look at Eleanor, you can see the grade that caused her concern. And you can see, if I look vertically, this idea, this concept, this standard, many students are struggling with it, in fact. So this is definitely something that I'm going to want to review and spend some more time with and start beginning to parse their miscomprehension so I can identify where it is that my students are struggling with this concept. I can also look horizontally and notice some students, John Doe in particular. I noticed that there are many standards that are in green in his account. This is a student that I may want to pull aside and review some instructional content with. So thank you very much for spending some time to take a look at why I love ExitTicket so much. There is so much more that I didn't show, but I hope you get an idea about the instructional impact that this tool can drive.